It is Friday, Yud Cheshvan Tovshin Ayin Tes. We are in Teres Menachem Sefer Mamar Tovshin Yud Gimel in the Mamar of Shavuos Vayedaber Anochi. We are on page Kuf Ayin, and we are at chapter 4 Ois Daled. The Rebbe is discussing the concept of Doimim Tzemeach Chayin Medaber, the inanimate, the vegetable, the animal, and the human, four categories in which all of creation is divided. He's discussing that as it is in the world, as it is in man, as it is in man's service of Hashem, and now the Rebbe is going to discuss it as it is in Torah. That's where we're up to. So too it is also in the Torah. She'inyan haTorah misyachas ledibur dafke. Torah relates specifically to speech. So in other words, from the four categories, I guess the Rebbe goes directly to the Medaber level. Insofar as Torah is concerned. And he says that Torah relates specifically to speech. Kamesha Kosov, where do we see that Torah relates specifically to speech? As it says in the pasuk, in the verse in Yehoshua, Layomush Sefer HaTorah Hazeh Mipicha Dafka. This book of the Torah shall not leave your mouth. So what do we see? It says Mipicha. The word Dafka is not from the pasuk, it's not from the verse, but it relates the Sefer HaTorah, the Torah, to Mipicha, to your mouth. So in other words, the Torah is related to speech. In more detail, says the Rebbe, certainly when it comes to the written Torah relates to speech as opposed to, in other words, it's more of a foregone conclusion that Torah relates to speech in relation to the written Torah as opposed to the oral Torah, as the Rebbe explains. Because the written Torah, Shalachain, therefore, because Torah relates to speech, therefore the halacha is Gam Am Ha'aretz, even an ignoramus, She'ein Mevin, who doesn't understand Afilu Pirush HaMilis, even the basic interpretation of the words of the written Torah, Mevarech Birchas HaTorah, is obligated to make the blessing over the Torah, before he actually reads the letters of the Torah. Right? So in other words, the obligation is, we know that before we read the Torah or learn the Torah, we have to make Birchas HaTorah, the blessing over the Torah. So the question is, if somebody doesn't understand what he's reading, is he obligated to make the bracha? So the halacha is that if we're talking about Torah Shabbat, the written Torah, even if someone doesn't understand what he's reading, even the basic, even if he doesn't understand even the basic interpretation, meaning of the words, he's still obligated to make a bracha. So what do we see from here? That the written Torah is certainly related to the mouth, the speech. Very basic speech. Right? It's even more emphasized, because on the other hand, before making the blessing over the Torah, one is allowed to think words of Torah. Right? The din is that before making the blessings over the Torah, it's prohibited to learn Torah. That's halacha number one. Halacha number two,
learn Torah. So
before you learn Torah, you have to make a bracha.
In the morning we do the bracha. And
precisely, that's why
covers us for the day.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, what happens? Okay, so now we know that before learning Torah, you have to make a bracha. That's step number one. Step number two, what happens if I read the Torah and I don't understand what I'm reading? The halacha is, so far as Torah Shebechsav, the written Torah is concerned, you're obliged to make a bracha even if you don't understand what you're reading, if one doesn't understand what he's reading. Step number three, point number three, am I allowed to think words of Torah or thoughts of Torah without making a bracha before I make a Birchas HaTorah? So the answer is, it's permitted. The only thing that's prohibited before making the bracha over the Torah is to utter words of Torah. Only speech is prohibited. Even though it is also better not even to think words of Torah before you make the bracha over the Torah. In other words, one should try to make the bracha over the Torah even before one thinks words of Torah. Says the Rebbe, this is merely as a stringency. It's better not to think words of Torah before you make a bracha over the Torah. But the prohibition is only, the prohibition is only insofar as uttering words of Torah before making the bracha over the Torah. What's the sum total of all of this? That we see that Torah, certainly the written Torah, has a connection specifically to what? Is related to what? To speech, to the mouth. So certainly so far as the written Torah is concerned, where we have all these emphases on the spoken word, but also so far as the oral Torah is concerned, the whole point of the oral Torah is what? Is comprehension. If one doesn't understand what one is learning insofar as the oral Torah is concerned, it's not considered learning at all. So maybe, perhaps, when it comes to the oral Torah, it is not related to speech. Says the Rebbe, we find that there is an emphasis on speech, on words, also insofar as the oral Torah is concerned. Matzinu, we find, we find that the oral Torah relates to speech as well. Kamesha Kosov, as the verse states, there's a pasuk in Mishlei, in Proverbs, that says, Chayim heim l'moitzeim or l'chol b'sara marpe. It is life for all that find it. Right? So, Chayim heim l'moitzeim. So the word is read as, the word l'moitzeim is read as l'moitzeim for those that find it. That is the simple reading as it's written in the verse, in the pasuk in Mishlei, right? However, V'dorshu Chazal, our sages, learn from this, homiletically, that you should not read it l'moitzeim, it should be read l'moitzi'ehem. L'moitzi'ehem means for those that bring it out, or rather for those that utter it. L'moitzi'ehem bepeh dafka, right? If you want to know what the background is, the Gemara in there in Eruvin says, there was a very famous woman in the Mishnah and in the Talmud known as Bruria. Bruria was the wife of Rabbi Meir. She was very very knowledgeable, very sharp, had a very sharp wit. And the Gemara quotes a number of things in the name of Bruria. So the story in the Eruvin, Nun Gimel, says that Bruria found. So the Gemara says that Bruria came across a certain student who was studying quietly. He was whispering the words rather than saying them loudly. So she kicked him. Gemara says she gave him a kick, and she said, "Isn't it written, ordered are things and secure?" This is a pasuk in Shmuel. What does it mean? Ordered are things and secure. It indicates that if Torah is ordered in all the 248 limbs, which means to say, if one exerts himself whilst learning Torah, it will be secure, which means you will remember your Torah, and if not, it will not. Excuse me. And if not, it will not be secure. So in other words, the pasuk indicates that when a person learns, all the person's 248 limbs need to be involved in the process of learning, including, of course, what? The mouth. The Gemara relates further that it was similarly taught in the Braisa that Rabbi Eliezer had a student who would study quietly, and after 3 years, he forgot it. Incidental to the story cited above, it brings another story. Then the Gemara cites instructions issued by Shmuel that are similar to those of Bruria. Shmuel said to Rav Yehuda, Shinina, keen scholar, open your mouth and read from the Torah. Open your mouth and study the Talmud, in order that your studies should endure. In order that your studies should endure in you, and that you should live a long life, as it is stated. This is the source for what we're reading now in the Maimer. For they are life for those who find them, and health to all flesh, which is from Mishlei. Do not read to those who find them, l'moitzeim, but rather to those who express them, l'moitzeim, to those who express them with their mouth. So that's the Gemara in Eruvin, right? So what do we see from here, at least? Again, that the Talmud clearly states that even insofar as the Talmud is concerned, meaning to say the oral Torah, it's related to expressing it with the mouth. So again, even so far as Torah Shebaal Peh is concerned, it's also related to Dibur, to the mouth, to Oisius. And although the main mitzvah, the main commandment of how we fulfill the learning of the Torah is the delving in, is actually the study of Torah. Okay, we highlighted now a number of points which seem to indicate that both the Torah Shebechsav and Torah Shebal-Peh, the written Torah and the oral Torah, are related to the mouth, to uttering it with the mouth. But you can't deny the fact that the main aspect of Torah is related to what? It would seem is related to what? To the study of Torah, which means it has to do with the mind. Where do we find this? As the Alter Rebbe writes in Shulchan Aruch, in the laws of Talmud Torah, shemitzvos v'hagisa b'yom v'layla, shezui mitzvos dibra Torah, nitchis mipnei mitzvah she efshar l'sayis al yidei acherim. Right? There is a din that Torah, as we say in brachas in the morning, in the mission of Elu Dvarim She'elam Shir, right at the tail end, we say the Talmud Torah, Keneget Kulam. Torah supersedes everything. Torah comes before everything. The study of Torah comes before everything. There's one exception. Mitzvah she'i efshar la'asayis al yidei acherim. If it's a mitzvah that cannot be performed through anybody else, if only I can perform it. If there's something that comes my way, right, and it has to be done, and no one else can do it besides me, I have to stop the study of Torah and go and do the mitzvah. Says the Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch, that's only so far as that is only so far as speaking the words of Torah. But so far as the knowledge of the words of Torah, meaning if somebody studies Torah deeply and delves into the Torah, it doesn't even get pushed away by what? By a mitzvah that cannot be performed through anybody else. That's what the Alter Rebbe says in Kunter Sacher in the latter version.
Well, I don't understand the subtle difference there. What are you saying? Talmud Chacham, you mean?
If correct, in other words, somebody studies Torah deeply.
Right. Then he
if it's a mitzvah, even if it's a mitzvah, even if it's a mitzvah that cannot be performed through anybody else, he carries on learning Torah and he doesn't do the mitzvah. When does the rule that a mitzvah a mitzvah that cannot be performed through anybody else does supersede Torah? Only when somebody speaks the words of Torah, dibra Torah, but not iyun Torah. Right? As the Alter Rebbe writes in the latter edition, in the supplement to his laws of Talmud Torah, that the mitzvah of toiling in Torah day and night, shezuhi mitzvahs dibra Torah, which is actually a reference to the mitzvah of uttering words of Torah, that mitzvah of Torah, nitchis, is superseded, is pushed away, is set aside, mipnei mitzvah she'ef shel aseh sadei acherim, in the face of a mitzvah which cannot be performed through anybody else. Masha'enke mitzvahs yediyas HaTorah, this is not the case when we talk about the mitzvah of knowing Torah, shezehu iyun HaTorah, this is the idea of delving and studying Torah deeply. Adifa minah, says the Alter Rebbe, supersedes a mitzvah she'ef shel aseh sadei acherim, supersedes a mitzvah that cannot be performed through anybody else. Ve'eina nitchis. And iyun HaTorah, studying Torah deeply, is not set aside, is not pushed away by a mitzvah that cannot be even by a mitzvah that cannot be performed by anybody else. Umizeh, moving from this is understood, she'ikar mitzvah the Talmud Torah hu iyun HaTorah. So this obviously points to the fact that what's the main mitzvah of learning Torah? Iyun HaTorah, which has to do with what? With the mind. So why am I making this whole emphasis that Torah is related to dibra speech? We find clearly that there is a very central aspect of Torah which is related to what? To Hasaga, to Iyun, to the mind. Mikol Mokim, says the Rebbe, Gam mitzvahs Iyun HaTorah misechesses l'dibur. You're right, but even this aspect of the mitzvah, of Iyun HaTorah, of delving deeply, studying Torah deeply, and understanding it properly, also relates to speech. Utzricha liyas b'dibur, and it needs to be uttered with the mouth. That is in fact the point of the story with Bruria that we just quoted from the Gemara in Eruvin, and also the instructions of Shmuel to Rav Yehuda. You're studying the Talmud. Obviously, he was studying it deeply. But say it with your mouth. It's not enough for you to understand it. If you understand it only in your mind, you don't utter it with your mouth, you'll forget the Torah. It won't be set in you. It won't be secure. That's the whole point that the Talmud is making. And even more so says the Rebbe, that's why we find in the Sfarim, in the holy books, the holy books that explain the connection of mitzvahs to various limbs of the body. There's a sefer called Sefer Charedim, in the book a sefer called Sefer Charedim, which is a whole sefer which the author goes through all the different. I believe that first of all, I believe the author of Sefer Charedim is actually the composer of the Yedid Nefesh. He lived in Tzfas in that era of Reb Shlomo Alkabetz, I believe, and the Arizal. So he wrote a sefer called Sefer Charedim, and he goes through all the. He says mitzvahs that are connected to the head, to the mind, mitzvahs that are connected to the eyes, mitzvahs that are connected to the nose, mitzvahs that are connected to the mouth, and he goes through all the different mitzvahs as they relate to the various limbs.
He explains why? Or he just explains it?
Well, it explains why, because it's obvious from the mitzvah that how the mitzvah is set up, right? Mitzvah related to the hands. He organizes mitzvahs, how they correspond to the various limbs of the various parts of the body, right? Mm-hmm. So in the Sfarim that explain the mitzvahs, how they relate to different parts of the body, particularly in Sefer Charedim, right? In those Sfarim, they relate the mitzvah of learning of the study of the Torah to the mouth. Which is specifically what? The idea of speech. So therefore, the bottom line is there's a special connection between Torah, whether it's the written Torah or the oral Torah, and dibur, and speech. Right? Which is like the idea of medaber, the highest form of serving Hashem, or the highest category of creation. Says the Rebbe, just another couple of lines, and then we'll stop because we have to daven. We'll leave it by the question. And move on. It would seemingly it's not understood. What does the word Torah actually mean? Torah comes from the word hirah, lesson, instruction, right? What's the whole point of learning Torah? The whole point of learning Torah is to know what we should do, how we should live as a Jew, the mitzvahs that we need to do. So therefore, what's the main point of Torah? The main point of Torah, certainly, yes, it's related to speech and so on and so forth. But surely the main point of Torah is what? Is understanding. You learn Torah in order to know the mitzvahs to perform. You can't learn it. You can't just utter the words and know what you have to do. You actually have to understand what you're saying. If that's the case, if this is the case, then the main aspect of Torah is certainly what? The knowledge of Torah, which is related to the mind. Havana Vasoga, understanding, comprehension. Why then do we relate the Torah specifically to speech? That is the question that the Rebbe asks, and he's going to give a beautiful explanation. This is a Maimer on Shavuos, because you may wonder why we're learning a Maimer on Shavuos just after Simchas Torah, or in the winter, coming into the winter. And the answer is because we started the Rebbe's Mamorim in chronological order. So we started with the first Maimer the Rebbe said in 1951 on Yud Shvat, and we're now in the middle of 1953. So it happens to be that we're in the chronological order of studying the Mamorim. We're in the Maimer of Shavuos, 1953, second day of Shavuos. And the Rebbe asks a question when it comes to the Ten Commandments, which is of course what we celebrate on Shavuos, the giving of the Ten Commandments, the Torah to Moshe. It says, Vayedaber Hashem, that Hashem uttered all these words, so to say, lamer. The word lamer normally denotes, what does it mean, lamer? When Hashem communicated to Moshe, he said, I'm saying it to you, but transmit it on to all the Jewish people. The question is, when it came to the giving of the Torah, all the Jewish people were present. Not only all the Jewish people from that generation, but all the neshamas, all the souls from all the future generations. So who was there to communicate it onto? Right? Even though, of course, we only heard the first 2 from Hashem, and the other 10 we did not, the other 8 we did not, but certainly when it came to saying those words, that happened later. The Jews said we can't handle it, right? But certainly insofar as the first 2 are concerned, all the Jews heard it from Hashem. So what's the lamer? That's question number 1. Question number 2, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, who has taken you out from Egypt, from the house of slavery. It seems to be a very long-winded way. Could have said it a lot shorter. Anochi Asher Etzicha mi beis avodim. I am the one who's taken you out from the house of slavery. Because the whole point of that first dibur is to say, that first commandment, the first utterance is to say, you were slaves by Pharaoh, I've taken you out, now you need to serve me. That's the point that Hashem is making in that statement. Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher etzicha me'eretz Mitzrayim. That's the central meaning of that statement. So say, Anochi, I am the one who's taken you out of the house of slavery. Therefore, I'm giving you all these mitzvahs, and you need to fulfill them. Why this whole Hashem Malakecha, Asher Tzisicha, Me'eretz Mitzrayim, Me'beis Avodim, when the Torah is so particular in choosing even a single letter, whether to insert it or not. So to explain that, the Rebbe begins to explain that the entire creation is divided into 4 categories: Doimim, Tzameach, Chayim, Medaber, the inanimate, the vegetable, the animal, and the human. And since the world is a macrocosm of the human, and the human is a microcosm of the world, we find all those corresponding 4 aspects in man. We also find those 4 categories in man's service of Hashem, meaning in the soul. And we also find those 4 categories in the Torah, because the Torah is the blueprint for the world, and the world is a macrocosm of man, and man is a microcosm of the world. So therefore the 3 are linked, and you find these 4 categories in the world, in man, and in Torah. So the Rebbe first explained it where it is in the world, then he explained where it is in man, and now the Rebbe is discussing Medaber, Dibur, the highest level of the 4 categories, how it is in Torah. That's where we're up to. So you just had an express synopsis of what we learned up until now.